The red warning lights painted everything in bloody shadows as Maria crawled through the maintenance shaft, her tool bag scraping against the metal walls behind her, while somewhere below the mining station groaned like a dying beast emergency. Sirens wailed through the corridors of Frontier's Edge, mixing with the sound of boots running on steel floors and voices shouting orders that nobody could follow anymore, because the situation had gone beyond any training they had received. Maria's hands shook as she reached the intersection where 3 maintenance tunnels met, and she had to make a choice between heading toward the main evacuation route or taking the longer path through the alien sections that nobody was supposed to enter without proper clearance. The whole mess had started 6 hours ago, when the long-range sensors picked up something massive approaching their position near the gas giant Kronos, something that didn't match any ship design in their databases and moved with a purpose that made everyone nervous. Captain Roberts had followed first contact protocols perfectly, sending out friendly greetings in 12 different languages and mathematical sequences, but the response had been immediate and violent. Energy weapons that cut through their shields like paper and boarding pods that latched onto their hull with mechanical precision. Now the station was being evacuated section by section, while security teams tried to buy time for the civilians to escape. But Maria had been cut off from the main evacuation routes when the aliens breached Section C and started moving through the corridors with those terrible clicking sounds that made her skin crawl. She chose the alien section because it was the only way left, even though regulations said that human personnel needed special authorization and protective gear to enter areas where they stored artifacts and specimens from non-human sources. The maintenance tunnel opened into a research bay that felt different from the rest of the station, with walls that curved in ways that hurt to look at, and lighting that seemed to shift colors when she wasn't paying attention. Emergency power flickered on and off, making shadows dance across equipment that she couldn't identify. Machines with too many angles and surfaces that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. Maria moved carefully through the bay, trying not to touch anything that might be dangerous or valuable, when she heard something that made her freeze completely. A sound like crying, but not quite human, coming from somewhere deeper in the alien section. Against every instinct that told her to run toward the evacuation pods, she followed the sound through corridors that felt like walking inside some enormous creature, until she found a door marked with symbols that her translator couldn't read. The crying sound was louder now, desperate and frightened, and Maria realized that she couldn't leave without knowing what was making that noise, even if it meant missing her chance to escape. She forced the door open using her engineering codes and stepped into what could only be described as a nursery, but designed by minds that thought differently about comfort and safety. The room was warm and humid, with soft materials covering the floor and walls in patterns that seemed organic rather than manufactured, and in the center sat the source of the crying, a creature no bigger than a house cat but clearly not from Earth. The baby dragon, and there was no other way to think about it despite everything she knew about alien biology, had scales that shifted between deep blue and purple, wings folded against its small body, and eyes that held an intelligence that made Maria's breath catch in her throat. Most remarkably, the tiny creature clutched a bottle in its clawed hands, something made of crystal or glass that seemed to contain liquid light, and it was protecting this bottle with fierce determination, despite its obvious fear. Maria knelt down slowly, speaking in the soft voice she used with frightened animals, trying to project calm while explosions echoed through the station and the sounds of fighting grew closer. The baby dragon looked at her with those enormous eyes, tears streaming down its scaled face. But it didn't back away when she extended her hand, and it didn't let go of its bottle even when she carefully lifted it up. She could feel how light the creature was, all hollow bones and delicate features, designed for flight in some alien sky. And she understood without words that this baby had been left behind in the evacuation of the bigger ship. The bottle in its hands pulsed with gentle light, and Maria realized that whatever it contained was more than just food or water. It was important enough that the baby dragon would risk everything to keep it safe. Another explosion shook the station, this one close enough to make the nursery. Walls crack, and Maria knew that she had seconds to make a decision that would change everything. She zipped her jacket partially open and gently placed the baby dragon inside against her chest, where it curled up with its bottle pressed close to its body, trembling but trusting her enough to let her carry it. The return journey through the maintenance shafts was a nightmare of crawling through spaces barely wide enough for her body while trying not to crush the tiny passenger hidden in her jacket, all while the station continued to tear itself apart around them. Emergency lights failed one by one as she moved, leaving her with only the soft glow from the baby dragon's bottle to guide her through the maze of tunnels that led toward the evacuation. She could hear the evacuation alarms growing more urgent, the mechanical voice counting down the time remaining before the last transport ships would be forced to leave without the stragglers who couldn't reach the departure zones. When she finally emerged into the main corridor leading to Bay 7, the scene was chaos. People running with whatever they could carry, children crying for parents they couldn't find, and security officers trying to maintain order while explosions echoed through the hull. The baby dragon pressed closer against her chest, its bottle glowing brighter as if responding to the danger around them, and Maria realized that she had committed herself to something far bigger than a simple rescue. She joined the stream of evacuees moving toward the transport ship Haven, one hand pressed protectively over her jacket where the tiny alien rested, knowing that she was carrying something precious beyond measure. As the airlock sealed behind the last group of evacuees and the transport ship pulled away from the dying station, Maria looked back through the viewport at Frontier's edge being consumed by alien weapons and wondered what kind of future she had just helped to create. The baby dragon stirred against her chest, its bottle pulsing with gentle light, and she realized that some bottles are too important to surrender, no matter what the cost might be. The refugee transport haven drifted through space like an overcrowded tin can, filled with people who had lost everything except their lives, while Maria sat in her assigned corner trying to figure out how to care for an alien baby that refused. Every type of food she offered 3 days had passed since the evacuation, and the tiny dragon she had hidden in her jacket showed no interest in the emergency rations, water supplies, or even the milk substitute that Dr. James had synthesized based on his best guess about alien nutrition. The baby dragon, now called Pip thanks to 7-year-old Tommy, who had been the first refugee child to spot the tiny creature, would only clutch his crystal bottle closer whenever anyone tried to feed him anything else. Maria watched with growing concern as Pip grew weaker, his beautiful blue-purple scales losing their luster, and his large eyes becoming dull with exhaustion. But still he would not let go of that bottle or accept any substitute. Tommy had lost both parents when the aliens attacked Frontier's Edge, and somehow he had decided that Pip needed his protection just as much as Pip needed Maria's care, so the boy spent hours sitting beside the tiny dragon and telling him stories about Earth. The other refugees had mixed reactions to their unexpected passenger. Some thought it was wonderful that they had saved an innocent creature, while others worried that harboring an alien might bring more trouble than they could handle. Dr. James examined Pip every few hours with his portable medical scanner, frowning at readings that made no sense according to any biological model he understood, while the tiny dragon submitted to the tests with patient dignity. His metabolism is completely different from anything I've studied, Dr. James explained to Maria during one of their whispered conversations in the medical section. But I can tell you that he's slowly starving, and I don't know how much longer he can survive without proper nutrition. Colonel Hayes, the military advisor who had been on Frontier's Edge during the attack, made his position clear whenever he thought Maria couldn't hear. The alien creature was potentially dangerous and should be isolated until they reached a proper facility. We don't know anything about its species, Colonel Hayes argued during the daily briefings with the ship's captain. It could be carrying diseases, or it could be some kind of weapon designed to look harmless while it studies our defenses. But Pip's gentle nature made those arguments sound ridiculous to anyone who spent time observing him, especially when he would curl up in Tommy's lap and make soft purring sounds that seemed to comfort the grieving child. The bottle remained the central mystery. Sometimes it glowed brighter, sometimes the light inside swirled in patterns that almost looked like writing, and occasionally Maria could swear she heard very faint music coming from within the crystal walls. Maria tried everything she could think of to understand what Pip needed. She held different foods near the bottle to see if he would show interest. She tried to analyze the bottle's contents using the ship's basic sensors, and she even attempted to communicate by showing Pip pictures of various substances. The tiny dragon would watch her efforts with those intelligent eyes, and sometimes he would make small chirping sounds that seemed like he was trying to explain something, but the language barrier remained absolute. Tommy proved surprisingly helpful in observing Pip's behavior, reporting details that the adults missed because they were focused on medical readings rather than emotional responses. "He gets sadder when people talk about taking his bottle away," Tommy told Maria one evening as they sat together in the refugee quarters. "And he gets scared when Colonel Hayes comes around, but he's not scared of you or Dr. James." The ship's captain, a practical woman named Captain Ross, tried to maintain neutrality about their alien passenger while dealing with the larger problems of transporting 300 refugees across space with limited supplies. As the days passed, Pip's condition continued to deteriorate despite everyone's best efforts, and Maria began to wonder if she had saved him from the attack only to watch him die slowly from starvation. The bottle's glow seemed to pulse in rhythm with Pip's heartbeat, growing dimmer as the tiny dragon grew weaker, and Maria realized that somehow the two were connected in ways she couldn't understand. Dr. James documented everything he could about Pip's physiology, hoping that his observations might help if they ever encountered more of the same species, but his equipment was limited and his expertise was in human medicine. "The bottle isn't just a feeding device," Dr. James concluded after his latest examination. "The energy readings suggest it's some kind of sophisticated technology, possibly biomechanical in nature." Colonel Hayes seized on this information as proof that Pip was dangerous, arguing that any species capable of creating such advanced technology posed a potential threat to human security. The tension on the ship grew worse as more refugees began to take sides about Pip's presence, with some demanding that he be quarantined while others insisted that protecting him was their moral duty. Maria found herself caught in the middle of arguments she had never expected to have, defending decisions she had made instinctively without considering the larger implications. Tommy remained Pip's most loyal defender, using the kind of pure logic that only children possess to argue against the adults who wanted to separate them. "Pip didn't hurt anybody," Tommy would say whenever someone complained about the alien presence. "He was left behind just like us, and Maria saved him just like she saved me." The truth of Tommy's words hit Maria harder than any of Colonel Hayes' security concerns, because she realized that all of them, human refugees and alien baby alike, were survivors trying to find their way to safety. As Haven continued its journey toward the outer colonies, Maria watched Pip growing weaker while his bottle grew dimmer, and she wondered if love and good intentions would be enough to save a creature whose needs she couldn't even understand. The tiny dragon would look at her with trust and gratitude, even in his weakened state, and Maria realized that some responsibilities choose you, rather than the other way around. She had taken Pip from his destroyed home, without knowing anything about his species, his diet, his biology, or his culture, and now she had to live with the consequences of that decision. But every time she considered giving up, Tommy would sit beside Pip and tell him another story about Earth, and the tiny dragon would purr softly and clutch his bottle closer, and Maria would remember that some battles are worth fighting even when victory seems impossible. The outer colony research station Harmony drifted in the shadow of a ringed planet, its laboratories and medical facilities representing the last hope for saving Pip as his condition reached a critical point where even his stubborn determination couldn't keep him alive much longer. Dr. Susan Wells had worked with more alien specimens than anyone else in human space, but when Maria contacted her through emergency channels about a dying alien infant, even she seemed uncertain about what they might be dealing with. "I've never seen anything quite like this," Dr. Wells admitted as she examined Pip in her advanced xenobiology lab while the tiny dragon lay motionless except for the shallow rise and fall of his chest, still clutching his bottle with weakening claws. The crystal bottle had grown so dim that its light was barely visible, pulsing irregularly like a failing heartbeat, and the patterns inside the crystal had become still and lifeless. Tommy refused to leave Pip's side during the examination, holding the tiny dragon's free claw while Dr. Wells ran scan after scan with equipment that could analyze alien biology down to the molecular level. "The bottle isn't just connected to him," Dr. Wells explained to Maria and Captain Ross as her computers processed terabytes of data. It's integrated with his nervous system in ways that suggest it was designed specifically for his species. The readings showed that Pip's brain activity spiked whenever the bottle was touched or moved, and his vital signs became more stable when the crystal was positioned close to his head. It's not a feeding bottle at all, Dr. Wells continued as more data came through her analysis systems. It's some kind of bioneural interface, possibly containing compressed information or even stored consciousness patterns. Colonel Hayes had followed them to Harmony Station despite Captain Ross's objections, and he immediately saw military applications in Dr. Wells's discoveries, demanding that the bottle be separated from Pip for detailed study. If that device contains alien technology or intelligence data, it needs to be secured and analyzed by military specialists, Colonel Hayes argued. We can't let emotional attachment to one alien infant compromise potential strategic advantages. But when Dr. Wells attempted to gently remove the bottle from Pip's grasp for more detailed scanning, the tiny dragon's vital signs crashed immediately and alarms screamed throughout the medical bay. He'll die if we separate them, Dr. Wells said as she quickly returned the bottle to Pip's claws, watching his readings stabilize slightly. Whatever that device is, he needs it to survive. Tommy had been watching everything with the intense focus that children bring to matters of life and death, and he was the first to notice something that all the adults had missed. Look at the pictures in the bottle, Tommy said, pointing to patterns that were becoming visible in the crystal as Pip's condition worsened. They're moving like a movie. Dr. Wells adjusted her sensors and directed them at the bottle's interior, and suddenly the laboratory filled with holographic images that took everyone's breath away. Star maps, technical diagrams, and what appeared to be historical records of an entire civilization. The images showed creatures that looked like adult versions of Pip, with magnificent wings and scales that shimmered with the same colors as his bottle, living in cities that floated among the clouds of gas giant planets. This isn't just a device, Dr. Wells whispered as more holograms appeared, showing the history of Pip's people fleeing from some great catastrophe. It's a cultural archive, possibly containing the entire knowledge base of his species. The holographic records revealed that Pip's people called themselves the Drakmori, and they had been forced to abandon their homeworld when a plague of mechanical parasites began consuming everything in their system. Maria watched in amazement as the bottle projected images of vast refugee fleets carrying the survivors to new worlds, each ship carrying precious cargo that would help the Drakmori rebuild their civilization elsewhere. He's not just any Drakmori infant, Dr. Wells realized as she analyzed the specific data patterns in Pip's bottle. The genetic markers and neural interfaces suggest he's from their leadership caste, possibly even royal lineage. The bottle contained not just historical records but also technical specifications for advanced medical treatments, environmental controls, and space travel technologies that could revolutionize human understanding of science. But the most important discovery came when Dr. Wells's computers finished analyzing the plague data that the Drakmori had been fleeing. The same mechanical parasites were now spreading through human space, having followed the refugee trails. They're already here, Dr. Wells said as she pulled up recent reports from frontier colonies. The same energy signatures, the same consumption patterns, attacking our outer settlements just like they attacked. The Drakmori homeworld Pip's bottle didn't just contain his people's history, it contained the cure for the plague, developed by Drakmori scientists during their desperate flight from the mechanical swarm. The bottle is testing him, Dr. Wells explained as she watched Pip's brain activity spike in response to the holographic displays. It's determining whether he's worthy to inherit his people's knowledge and responsibility. Tommy understood before any of the adults did, because children often see truth more clearly than people trained to complicate everything. He has to choose, Tommy said simply, between staying safe or helping everyone, just like Maria chose to save him, even though it was dangerous. The bottle began to glow more brightly as if responding to Tommy's words, and Pip's eyes opened for the first time in days, looking directly at Maria with an expression that seemed to contain ancient wisdom. He's been protecting the bottle all along, Maria realized. Not because he needed it for food, but because he knew how important it was even as a baby. The holographic displays shifted to show more recent data. The locations of Drakmori refugee fleets scattered across the galaxy, the coordinates of their new homeworld, and most critically, the complete specifications for weapons that could destroy the mechanical plague. Pip made a soft sound that might have been a sigh, and the bottle's light began to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, but stronger and steadier than before. "He's accepting the inheritance," Dr. Wells said as her scanner showed massive changes in Pip's neural activity. "The bottle is downloading the entire cultural database directly into his consciousness." The process was beautiful and terrifying to watch. Pip's small body glowed with the same light as his bottle, and holographic symbols flowed through the air around him like living things finding their proper places. Colonel Hayes tried to interfere, reaching for the bottle during the downloading process, but Maria blocked his path with a determination that surprised everyone, including herself. "This is bigger than military strategy," Maria told him firmly. "This is about saving both species from extinction, and Pip is the key to making that happen." Tommy held Pip's other claw throughout the entire process, providing the kind of innocent faith that seemed to strengthen the tiny dragon's resolve to accept such enormous responsibility. When the download finally completed, Pip opened his eyes and looked at each of them in turn with an intelligence that was both ancient and achingly young, and Maria realized that their baby dragon had just become something unprecedented in galactic history. The bottle had become permanently fused with Pip's physiology, no longer a separate device but an integral part of his being, and through him, the wisdom of the Drakmori would guide both species through the crisis ahead. The transformation began during the night shift when most of Harmony Station slept, but Tommy had refused to leave Pip's side, and was the first to witness something that would change everything they thought they knew about courage and sacrifice. Pip lay in the medical bay surrounded by monitoring equipment that tracked every aspect of his recovery, while the bottle, now permanently part of his physiology, pulsed with steady light that had grown stronger since the knowledge transfer completed. Dr. Wells had been reviewing the Drakmori plague data when the alarm started screaming, not because something was wrong with Pip, but because something was happening that her equipment couldn't measure or understand. The tiny dragon's body began to glow with the same crystalline light as his bottle, and the air around him shimmered with energy patterns that made the station's sensors go wild with readings that shouldn't have been possible. Tommy watched in fascination rather than fear as holographic star maps filled the medical bay, showing not just the locations of Drakmori refugee fleets but also the spreading path of the mechanical plague across human space. "It's getting worse," Dr. Wells said as she analyzed the new data streaming from Pip's integrated systems. "The plague has already consumed 17 human colonies, and it's moving faster than anyone realized." The mechanical parasites weren't just destroying planets randomly. They were following specific patterns, targeting worlds with the highest populations and most advanced technology, just as they had done in Drakmori. Space Maria arrived at the medical bay to find Pip sitting up for the first time since his collapse, his eyes bright with intelligence that seemed far older than his young body should contain. "He knows," Tommy said simply when Maria asked what was happening. "He knows everything now, and he's trying to figure out how to help everyone." Pip looked at Maria with those enormous eyes that now held the weight of 2 civilizations, and he made soft sounds that the translation software couldn't interpret, but somehow conveyed urgency and determination. The holographic displays shifted to show technical specifications for weapons that could destroy the mechanical parasites, but the designs were so advanced that human technology couldn't build them without Drakmori assistance. "We need his people," Dr. Wells explained as she studied the weapon schematics. "But according to these star maps, the nearest Drakmori fleet is 3 months away at maximum speed." Colonel Hayes had been monitoring the situation from the station's command center, and he arrived with a squad of security personnel just as Pip began projecting new holographic data. "The alien technology needs to be secured immediately," Colonel Hayes announced. "This is too important for human security to leave in the hands of refugees and xenobiologists." But when his security team tried to approach Pip, the tiny dragon's bottle blazed with protective light that forced them to shield their eyes, and the holographic displays flickered with warning symbols. Tommy stepped between the soldiers and Pip with the kind of fearless determination that only children possess when protecting something they love. "You can't take him," Tommy said firmly. "He's not a weapon or a thing. He's trying to save everyone, including you." Pip made a series of soft chirping sounds while reaching toward Tommy with one small claw, and somehow the translation software finally found patterns. "It could work with friend protector safe," came through the speakers in a mechanical voice that couldn't capture the warmth in Pip's tone. "Knowledge sharing willing, trust required essential." Dr. Wells realized that Pip was offering to share the plague cure with humanity, but only if they approached the situation with cooperation rather than military force. "He's trying to establish diplomatic contact," she explained, to Colonel Hayes. "The Drakmori knowledge he inherited includes protocols for interspecies alliance, but they require mutual respect and trust." The holographic displays showed more than just weapon designs. They revealed the locations of Drakmori, refugee camps, the coordinates of their new homeworld, and most importantly, the communication frequencies needed to contact their leadership. Maria understood before anyone else what Pip was really offering. Not just the tools to fight the plague, but the foundation for the first true alliance between humans and an alien species. He could have kept all this knowledge to himself, Maria said as she watched Pip struggling to communicate complex ideas through limited translation software. But he's choosing to share it because he knows we're facing the same enemy. The plague data showed terrifying projections. Without intervention, the mechanical parasites would consume all human space within 2 years, then continue their expansion, until they reached the Drakmori's new territories. Pip had inherited not just his people's knowledge but also their responsibility to protect innocent life wherever they found it, and his refusal to abandon his bottle had been preparation for this moment. The bottle wasn't keeping him alive, Dr. Wells realized as she watched the continuing data transfer. It was keeping the knowledge safe until he was ready to use it responsibly. Tommy sat beside Pip and took his small claw in both hands, providing the kind of simple human comfort that seemed to strengthen the tiny dragon's resolve. "You don't have to do this alone," Tommy told Pip in the serious voice that children use when they understand something is very important. "Maria saved you, and now we can all help save everyone else." Pip's response came through the translation system with surprising clarity. "Pack family chosen, strength shared multiplied, hope preserved together." The holographic displays shifted once more to show something that made everyone in the medical bay catch their breath. A direct communication link to the Drakmori fleet flagship, where Pip's people had been searching desperately for their lost heir. "He's calling them home," Maria whispered, as she watched alien symbols flowing through the air, carrying messages across the vast distances between stars within hours. Response. Signals began arriving from Drakmori ships throughout the galaxy, confirming that they had received Pip's transmissions and were changing course toward human space. But the responses contained more than just acknowledgement. They brought news of advanced medical ships already en route, carrying treatments for the plague that was spreading through human colonies. "They've been fighting this enemy for longer than we've known it existed," Dr. Wells translated from the incoming data streams, "and they're willing to share everything. They've learned if we're willing to work together." Colonel Hayes found himself faced with a choice he had never expected: continue treating Pip as a potential threat, or accept that humanity's survival might depend on trusting an alien infant who had proven more diplomatic than most human ambassadors. Pip settled the matter by projecting one final hologram that showed the combined human and Drakmori fleets working together to drive back the mechanical plague, followed by images of the two species building something new among the stars. The tiny dragon who had once seemed so fragile now pulsed with power that could reshape the galaxy, but he still looked to Maria and Tommy for the kind of emotional support that reminded everyone he was still very young, despite his inherited wisdom. "The awakening is complete," Dr. Wells announced as Pip's vital signs stabilized at levels far stronger than anything they had recorded before. "But this is just the beginning of something much larger." Maria looked at Pip. No longer just a rescued alien infant, but now the bridge between two species facing extinction, and realized that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the course of history itself. The first Drakmori medical ships arrived at human colonies like angels of mercy, their sleek forms cutting through space with technology that made even the most advanced human vessels look primitive. By comparison, Pip had grown during the 3 weeks since his awakening, now the size of a medium dog but still young enough to curl up in Tommy's lap when the diplomatic meetings became too overwhelming for someone who was technically still an infant. The plague that had been consuming human settlements was stopped cold by Drakmori medical technology, treatments that could neutralize the mechanical parasites at the cellular level and restore damaged ecosystems within days rather than years. Maria found herself appointed as Pip's official guardian and primary human liaison, a job she had never trained for but seemed to understand instinctively because it was based on the same protective instincts that had led her to save him in the first place. The Drakmori High Council wants to meet with human leadership, Dr. Wells translated during one of the daily briefings, but they insist that Pip must be present as their representative, even though he's barely old enough to understand the full implications of what he's inherited. Tommy had become Pip's constant companion and unofficial translator for the emotional nuances that the sophisticated communication systems couldn't capture, somehow understanding what the young Drakmori meant, even when the words didn't quite work. The refugee transport haven had been converted into a mobile diplomatic center, traveling between human colonies and Drakmori fleet positions to facilitate the growing alliance between the two species. Colonel Hayes had struggled to adapt to the new reality, where military solutions were less important than cultural understanding. But even he couldn't argue with results when Drakmori technology saved millions of human lives. "They're not conquering us," he admitted during a private conversation with Captain Ross. "They're genuinely trying to help, and that's harder to deal with than if they had just been hostile from the beginning." Pip's bottle, now fully integrated, with his growing body, served as both communication device and cultural archive, allowing him to access Drakmori protocols for interspecies diplomacy that were older than human civilization. The young dragon had learned to speak basic human languages with surprising speed, though he still preferred to communicate through the holographic displays that could convey complex ideas more precisely than words. "Human friends help strong," Pip would say during the negotiation sessions, his childlike grammar somehow making his diplomatic statements more sincere than the formal language used by adult ambassadors. The alliance took shape around practical cooperation rather than abstract treaties. Human colonies provided raw materials and manufacturing capacity, while Drakmori ships offered medical technology and protection from the mechanical plague. Tommy proved surprisingly valuable as a cultural ambassador himself, because his friendship with Pip demonstrated to both species that cooperation was possible. At the most basic level, if a human child and a Drakmori heir can be best friends, Captain Ross observed, then maybe our species have more in common than our differences suggest. The mechanical plague had been more than just a threat to both civilizations. It had been the catalyst that forced them to work together, or face extinction separately. Drakmori refugee ships began establishing permanent settlements near human colonies, creating mixed communities where the two species could learn from each other while maintaining their distinct cultures. Pip thrived in this environment, growing stronger and more confident as he watched the alliance he had helped create begin to transform both civilizations. "He's not just translating languages," Dr. Wells noted as she observed Pip during a joint scientific conference. "He's translating entire ways of thinking, helping each species understand how the other approaches our problems." The young Drakmori had inherited memories of his people's golden age before the plague, but he was creating new memories based on cooperation and friendship that would become part of his people's future cultural archive. Maria watched Pip teaching Tommy how to read Drakmori star charts while Tommy showed him human games, and she realized that these childhood experiences were laying the foundation for generations of interspecies understanding. The first joint human Drakmori colony was established on a world that had been devastated by the mechanical plague, transformed into a symbol of renewal and cooperation between species who had once been strangers. Pip insisted on visiting the new colony, despite his youth, wanting to see firsthand how the alliance he had helped create was changing lives for both humans and Drakmori. "This is what the knowledge was for," he explained to Maria as they walked through the rebuilt city where human and Drakmori architecture blended into something entirely new. Not just survival, but growing together. The bottle's glow had become a constant, gentle light that seemed to respond to Pip's emotions, brightening when he was happy and pulsing faster when he was excited about some new discovery. Tommy had started keeping a journal of their adventures, illustrating it with drawings of Pip and the various aliens they met, creating what would become one of the first human accounts of interspecies friendship. The mechanical plague still threatened other parts of the galaxy, but now human and Drakmori ships hunted it together, using combined technologies that were more effective than either species could have developed alone. "We're not just fighting the plague anymore," and Colonel Hayes admitted as he reviewed reports from the Joint Fleet operations. "We're proving that different species can work together to protect innocent life everywhere." Pip had grown wise beyond his years, but still retained the playful nature that made him beloved by children of both species, becoming a living symbol of hope for the future. The bottle that he had once protected so desperately now served as a beacon for other refugee species fleeing the mechanical plague, broadcasting messages of sanctuary and alliance across the galaxy. "Other species are responding to our signals," Dr. Wells reported during one of the Alliance Council meetings. "They want to know if the human-Drakmori cooperation model can be extended to include additional partners." Maria realized that what had started as a simple rescue had grown into something that could reshape galactic civilization, all because a baby dragon had refused to give up something precious. The first interspecies university was established, with Pip as its youngest but most important faculty member, teaching courses on cultural translation and diplomatic cooperation. Tommy enrolled in the first human Drakmori exchange program, spending equal time learning both human and alien sciences, while maintaining his special friendship with the young ambassador, who had changed everything. "The bridge is built," Pip announced during his first formal diplomatic address, his voice now strong and clear despite his youth. "Now we must help others cross it safely." The bottle's light pulsed brighter as he spoke, and Maria understood that this was only the beginning of something much larger than any of them had imagined when she first found a frightened alien baby clutching his most precious possession. 5 years after the evacuation of Frontier's Edge, the galaxy had become a place where the impossible happened daily. Human children played with alien youngsters in schoolyards that existed on worlds once thought uninhabitable, while their parents worked together on projects that neither species could have imagined alone. Pip had grown into a magnificent young adult Drakmori, his scales now shimmering with deep blues and purples that caught starlight like living jewels, his wings strong enough to carry him through the vast chambers of the space stations that served as centers of interspecies cooperation. The bottle, that had once seemed so large in his tiny claws, was now seamlessly integrated with his physiology, its light pulsing gently with his heartbeat and glowing brighter whenever he used the ancient knowledge it contained. Tommy, now 12 years old and fluent in 6 alien languages, served as Pip's cultural attaché and best friend, their partnership having become the model for successful interspecies cooperation throughout the Alliance. "Remember when you were small enough to hide in Maria's jacket?" Tommy would tease during their quiet moments together, while Pip would respond with mock dignity about the serious responsibilities he had always carried. The human Drakmori alliance had expanded to include 17 different species, each one drawn to the coalition by stories of the baby dragon, who had refused to surrender his bottle, and the humans who had chosen trust over fear. Maria now served as the Director of Interspecies Relations, a position created specifically for her because of her unique experience in building relationships across the barriers of biology and culture. The refugee camp that had once housed the survivors of Frontier's Edge had been transformed into the Alliance Academy, where young beings from dozens of species learned together, while their elders worked to heal the wounds left by the mechanical plague. Dr. Wells had become the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies medicine, developing treatments that worked across biological barriers while documenting the incredible diversity of life that the Alliance protected. Even Colonel Hayes had found his place in the new order, leading joint military operations that focused on protection and rescue rather than conquest. His tactical expertise invaluable in coordinating defense efforts across multiple star systems. The mechanical plague had been contained and slowly driven back, not through superior firepower but through the combined knowledge and cooperation of species who had learned to work together despite their differences. Pip's bottle had become something of a legend throughout Alliance space, the symbol of how refusing to surrender something precious could change the fate of civilizations. Every species that joins us brings their own version of the bottle, Pip explained to a group of new ambassador trainees, his voice now carrying the wisdom of his inherited memories combined with years of practical experience, something they guard so carefully that it becomes the foundation for trust. The newest members of the Alliance were a crystalline species called the Harmony, whose homeworld had been attacked by a resurgent wave of mechanical parasites just as they were developing space travel. Tommy had been instrumental in establishing first contact with the Harmony younglings, using lessons learned from his friendship with Pip to bridge the communication gap between carbon-based and silicon-based life forms. "It's always easier with the young ones," Maria observed as she watched Tommy teaching Harmony children how to play human games while Pip demonstrated Drakmori flight techniques. They don't have preconceptions about what's possible. The Alliance had established permanent settlements on 100 worlds, each one designed to accommodate multiple species, while preserving the unique cultural elements that made each civilization special. Pip often visited these mixed communities, his presence serving as a reminder that cooperation was not just possible, but could create something more beautiful than any single species could achieve alone. The bottle's archives had been opened to Alliance scientists and historians, revealing cultural treasures from the Drakmori Golden Age while recording the new achievements of the Interspecies Coalition. "We're not just preserving the past anymore," Pip would say during the regular broadcast that went out to all Alliance worlds. "We're creating new memories that future generations will treasure just as much." The mechanical plague still existed in remote parts of the galaxy, but its spread had been completely stopped, and Alliance exploration ships actively searched for any remaining pockets of infection. More importantly, the Coalition had developed early warning systems that could detect plague outbreaks before they became widespread, allowing rapid response teams to contain and eliminate the threat. Tommy had started writing a comprehensive history of the Alliance, interviewing beings from every member species to create a record of how cooperation had transformed the galaxy. "The story isn't about the technology or the politics," Tommy explained during one of his research interviews. "It's about individuals, choosing to trust each other even when they had every reason to be afraid." Pip had begun training the next generation of interspecies ambassadors, teaching them not just the technical aspects of diplomacy, but the emotional intelligence needed to build genuine relationships across species barriers. The bottle's light now served as a beacon for lost ships and refugees throughout Alliance space, broadcasting the frequencies and coordinates that offered sanctuary to anyone fleeing persecution or disaster. Maria often stood on the observation decks of Alliance stations, watching human and alien children playing together while their parents worked side by side, and marveled at how much had changed since that desperate day on Frontier's edge. The mining station where everything began had been rebuilt as a memorial and research facility, with a special exhibit dedicated to the story of the baby dragon, who had changed galactic history. Visitors from throughout Alliance space came to see the replica of the maintenance shaft where Maria had first heard Pip crying, and the reconstructed nursery where she had made the decision to save him. "Every choice creates ripples," Maria would tell the groups of young beings who toured the memorial, "but some choices create waves that can transform entire civilizations." The Alliance Council had commissioned a statue of Pip as a baby, clutching his bottle with that expression of determined innocence that had melted Maria's heart years ago. Installed at the center of every major Alliance facility, Tommy had grown into a young man who served as a bridge between generations, carrying the memory of the early days when trust was still fragile, while helping to build the confidence that made deeper cooperation possible. Pip's own children, the first generation of Drakmori to be born in Alliance space, played with human and alien youngsters as naturally as breathing, creating friendships that would shape the galaxy's future. "The bottle taught us that some things are worth protecting at any cost," Pip said during the 5th anniversary celebration of the Alliance, his voice carrying across space to millions of beings on hundreds of worlds. "But it also taught us that the most precious things become more valuable when they're shared." The legacy lived on in every classroom where different species learned together, in every laboratory where alien scientists collaborated on impossible projects, And in every playground where children who should have been natural enemies became the best of friends. Maria looked at Pip. Now a leader respected throughout the galaxy, but still the same brave soul who had trusted her enough to let her carry him to safety, and realized that some bottles are meant to be protected, not because they contain something precious, but because they represent the infinite possibility of what can happen when different worlds choose to care for each other.